So I'm here with Mike Burrows, who has just published a book with us in the BMI series in Dialogic OD on organizing conversations, preparing groups to take on adaptive challenges. Hi, Mike.
Hi, Jervis. Great to be here.
Um, why don't we start by telling the people who are watching this a little bit about how you got into the organizational change game? Tell us your origin story.
Yeah, well, my origin story is, I'm old enough, it's quite a long one, but I have a background in technology. And after 10 years in investment banking, I took on a role as a CTO for a late stage startup. And when that finished, came to a happy conclusion, I should say. I found myself in the consulting and training space. That job as CTO ended up, unbeknownst to me at the time, but it ended up being the case study for my first book. And that got me into the training space for Kanban, the Kanban method. It's using lean ideas in software development.
Mhm.
And I kept having this recurring problem. There were people in the room when I was training, particularly, well, doing private training in particular, inside companies.
Mhm.
And it was clear that people didn't know why they were there. They were compelled to be there essentially. Um, and that leads to a certain amount of challenge. You're dealing with the fact not only have you got content to deliver, and content that can be helpful for them, or you feel that can be helpful for them, but they don't know why they were there. They don't know what problem this is supposed to be solving, and so on. And it became apparent to me that there was a whole load of conversations that just weren't happening. Conversations between people who are going to be doing the work, asking to work in different ways, with sponsors, the kind of people that brought me in. Perhaps there'll be layers of management in between, and so on. And there seems to be a whole load of conversations not happening. And I got curious about that, dug into that. And at the same time, I was never happy with change being introduced via a process of imposition of compulsion. And with some colleagues in the agile community, people I've collaborated with now over a number of years, we were just really, to start with, just experimenting. How do we have better conversations? How do we better introduce change? And it's not until I read the Dialogic Organization Development book, the book that you co-authored, did I realize that actually I'm part of something bigger? There's other people experimenting with some of these same things, perhaps using different techniques to mine, but in fact, I saw a whole load of overlap. I was integrating ideas from clean language, from solutions focus, from challenge mapping, various other places. And we were slowly distilling some principles and some repeatable practices we could use ourselves, practices we could teach to other people. And it turned out people would even, when I published a book on this stuff, people I'd never met, never trained, were successfully using these ideas. And the closer I've got to your community, I find that helpful to formalize what I'm doing, formalize the thinking behind it as much as the practice, although the practice has evolved helpfully as well in that time. So I come to this not as an OD professional, it should be clear. I'm someone with real technology experience, real management, leadership experience. I was an executive director in an investment bank, for example, before I was at CTO.
Mhm.
Uh, but with I guess I'm motivated like a lot of people. I just want to do it right, and to do it right, to do something as important as this right, you have to develop, you have to apply some discipline, you have to do the research and so on. And that's what's brought me to where we are today with the publication of this book.
Well, I would say that most of the people that we've pulled into the Dialogic OD field or community of practice never called themselves a Dialogic OD practitioner.
No,
Uh, you know, it's like it's just a lot of different people coming to the same set of conclusions and
yes,
realizations around the same
yes,
time, but
yes,
coming at it from their own different way. And one of the
yes,
things I really value about what you brought to the table for us is a somewhat different point of view that comes from your background in Kanban and Lean and Agile, and a little more sort of structured and disciplined approach to the kind of work you do, and that shows up in this book. And I think people will find that helpful. Um, and you know, one of the key points you keep making in the book and the way you frame it is this idea that you really need to focus on outcomes before you focus on solutions, which makes a lot of sense to me. But I wonder why that became such an important thing in the work you were doing.
Couple of reasons, really. I think the first reason, it really flips the old change management approach or the managed change approach on its head. Instead of using, outcomes, benefits, and so on to sell a solution that's already been decided and is going to be rolled out, imposed on people, you could say, let's turn that around, start with the benefits that we want, and think about what different ways we could achieve those. And that's actually a really radical change, because you're going from what was originally a monolithic solution to opening the door for many, many, many solutions. And just that on its own is interesting. But then you put the power to articulate those outcomes into the hands of the people involved. And again, there's an order of magnitude increase in the number of outcomes that we're talking about, also relationships between outcomes and so on. We are creating many, many, many more opportunities for people to identify some aspects of this thing that we're talking about together that they could make a contribution to, that they could come up with a solution idea for. And it is just a completely different proposition. It turns around that old managed change thing on its head.
Yeah.
And makes it a much more, not just a participatory experience, but a more continuous experience. And that gives you then the chance to make it part of your normal way of operating.
Right.
That is so fundamentally different.
I agree with that. I think change management I've often described as kind of imposing change on people who didn't have any say in it. And,
Yes, yes.
what you're arguing.
Or my caricature of it is choose a solution, sell the solution, roll the solution out, live with the consequences.
Yeah.
And that is, it hits home because it is so close to people's experience of what it's like. And of course, we know how often that kind of approach fails as well.
Yeah. And how much more effective it is to engage the people who are going to have to change in coming up with ideas for how to accomplish the outcomes you're actually trying to seek rather than trying to sell a solution down the system.
Yes, absolutely. Yes, yes.
And a lot of the folks that have been engaged in the Dialogic OD community up to this point, a lot of our focus on that is more socio-emotional. How do you generate motivation? How do you get people into creating a psychologically safe environment? And what's different about your book from what we've put out so far is it's much more cognitively oriented around, what are the things that need to happen in people's thinking to get them ready to get into generative conversations where they come up with new ideas they want to act on. And
Yes.
could you say a little bit about what you've come to conclude are the essential things that need to happen in those kinds of inquiries before people are ready to step into those generative conversations?
Listening to you, I mean, I can actually imagine that some people are kind of getting the wrong idea. And what it's not about is persuasion.
Mhm.
There's definitely stuff going on in people's heads. Actually, what we're doing is really valuing what's people's going on in people's heads, treating that with respect, and seeing that as a source, a resource, something that ideas can flow from. And we're giving people the possibility to engage with the challenge, and that's something that your work has really identified as a key thing that people need to do. Engage with that challenge and think about in what different ways am I part of that challenge? Can I be part of finding solutions? What do I hope for as we engage with that challenge, as we start to see some progress to whatever our goals might be, and so on and so on and so on, and treat those different perspectives, those different responses to that challenge with respect. And at no point is it about persuading people that this is the right solution to be implementing. As I said, we're is outcomes first, solutions last, a continuous stream of solutions.
Mhm.
It's funny, I'm actually nervous of as describing it as a, a psychological approach, because I am so opposed to that, thinking that persuading people that we need to make this change. I think that's just the wrong place to start anything. Um, but we let things happen in people's heads, and it's the space that we allow for that. And the particular style of inquiry, of questioning, and so on that we ask, that pays a lot of respect to what's going on in people's heads, I think is what then creates the conditions for people then to feel safe to contribute solution ideas.
Mhm. Yeah. Well, what I like about the book is it identifies these patterns of inquiry that take a group from why are we here to a
Yes,
place where they know why they're here and they're ready to dig in and come up with ideas for how to make that stuff happen. So really appreciate that you've come a part of our merry band of I don't know what you want to call
it's
it,
it's an
but
honor to be here, really. Yeah.
and I'm hoping people will find this book, and particularly people who are new in the field and need, a little more sort of, here's how you do it. Here's step one, step two, step three. I think it'll be very useful for them.
Yes. I mean, it's some basic structure. It's not painting by numbers. It's some basic structure inside which some interesting conversations can happen, conversations that just can't be scripted, and that's it's reassuring to have that structure, but also exciting that within these structures, within these patterns, as I call them, some really exciting things can happen. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thanks so much, Mike.
Totally my pleasure, and thank you.